on this episode of the Mad Rush podcast.
When you think about public speaking or you think about presenting yourself, especially in a room of people, one thing that if you're Southern, you're going to have in your back pocket is the ability to tell through storytelling. I think it's just very much a part of being Southern. You know, anytime I'm interfacing with anyone in the South, I've lived in New York for 25 years now, I always think to myself, like, you have to forget that you're in New York right now and listen and don't interrupt. Like, let them tell the story, because that's how they're giving you the lesson. That's very much how my dad speaks. It's always told through stories. And so one thing I say on stage is don't get up there and say, in your case, thank you to 15 people. Tell the story of your podcast, how it came to be, and those people become part of the story. And that makes people listen and pay attention when you're on stage.
Welcome to the Mad Rush podcast. I'm Trisha Addix, the original sorority rush consultant. While the stories I have to share are nothing short of astonishing, this podcast goes beyond the wild client tales and sorority life. I'll be engaging with fascinating guests from both within and outside the Greek world, uncovering the surprising connections that bind us all together. Join me for a journey that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. Welcome to Mad Rush. Y'all, I am so excited about today's guest. She's an actual rock star. I met her in person recently, and I don't know if you noticed this, Lydia, but I am wearing the jacket I bought the morning that we were at this Southern Coterie Summit, and I should introduce you before I get into this, but we were shopping at Shop Buru, and they have the coolest clothes, and I bought this jacket, and it was when I asked Lydia to be on my podcast, and she very graciously accepted the invitation. So today I have Lydia Fenet, and she is an author. She is the founder of the Lydia Fenet Agency. And I literally, when I was trying to figure out a way to introduce her to you guys, I was like, I could literally read all the credentials for the entire time. So is there anything else that I should be saying besides rock star, author, speaker, and owner of the Lydia Fenet Agency?
I'd like to say inspire of people.
Yes.
Really, that's what I love to do more than anything. So I feel like I have so many different titles, but the real thread through all of them is that I love to inspire and motivate people.
Yes. And that is exactly why I wanted you to be on this podcast. I'm so grateful you're here. And I have read your books, and I have them right here.
Look. Thank you. The hot pink always jumps out.
Yes. So her books are The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You and Claim Your Confidence, Unlock Your Superpower to Create the Life You Want. And it resonates. What I do every day is try to help our clients and the young people I work with claim their confidence. And since I've read your book title, I now say claim your confidence, but I always credit you. So because because that's exactly what I try to do. So I want the listeners, and I want to hear. So talk to me about like your background, where you went to college, and then we'll get into like your inspiring stuff.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I was in a sorority, so I love the idea that there is someone who consults and makes this entire process easier for people, because I know as someone who went to the Suwanee, the University of the South, when I arrived there, it seemed so foreign to me. So I love what you do, and I'm excited to talk to you more about that. I started working for Christie's auction house when I was in college as an intern. So as I said, I went to the University of the South at Suwanee. And when I was there, I read an article in Vanity Fair magazine about an auction house called Christie's in New York City. And they were selling the dresses of Princess Diana, who at the time, my mom is British. She was sort of the person in the world. And it was really the idea about this glamorous world where people worked and they interfaced with the most powerful people in the world, and they traveled and they were exposed to art 24/7. it just really captured my imagination. And I thought to myself, this is the place for me. I have to go. And I don't know how many of your listeners out there are sort of in that place in their lives, or they're trying to carve out a path. I didn't really know what that path looked like. I just knew that there was something that appealed to me about this. And so in the book, I talk about securing my internship by calling the internship coordinator for 2 straight weeks. There was no caller ID when I was in college, so it was an effective tool. And I eventually got the internship.
So wait, were you leaving messages or were you just calling and hanging up when they didn't answer?
Oh, she answered every morning because there was no caller ID. So you always answered your phone. I think about it now. I mean, poor Mary Libby. When I wrote the book, she could not stop laughing. She called me. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even really remember this that well, but it was." She's like, "It doesn't surprise me to hear this story because knowing you, this is something you would do." But yeah, there was no caller ID, so no one knew who was on the other line. So they always picked up their phone. Think about that. I mean, no screening the
Oh,
calls.
forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was basically the way it started. I had my first internship, and people always ask me for advice for younger people or what I would tell my 21-year-old self. And I say more than anything, you will never ever be in a place in your life where hard work and a positive attitude aren't going to get you far. There are always going to be smarter people in the room than me, no question, but I will outwork you and I will be positive and bring that positivity. And that for people becomes something that they're really excited to have around. And because so many of the interns were people whose families were collectors and they didn't really take it seriously, I truly think that that was what distinguished me. I was willing to show up. I was willing to do anything they asked. I would stay later than anyone else. And that really became what I did from my internship, even into my early career at Christie. So I applied for a job when I left Christie's for my internship and was accepted for my senior year to get a job and basically just go straight there.
That's so cool. And I love the positivity message. I try to reframe. So sometimes people come to me after they've had an unsuccessful rush situation or just unsuccessful situations in college. And I always try to tell them to reframe it when they're talking to people about it the next time, instead of this happened to me or whatever, it's all about moving forward and being positive about the situation, not looking in the rearview mirror. And so I think that does clearly set you apart, but I think it sets anybody apart. Just being positive despite something not positive happening to you, or maybe, in any situation, period.
It's so true. And I also think the older I get, the more times I see a motivational sign or something that I never used to understand, or it would make me roll my eyes. The one that resonates with me most at this point in my career, having had so many successes, but also so many failures, is the importance of understanding how important failure is in your trajectory. Because the faster you get better at getting rejected and the easier it gets for you, the further you will go in your life and the faster you will go in your life, because that way you're unafraid to try different things. What really stymies most people, and I would think that this would be in rush, I would think that this would be in something as easy as the college application process. Like if you think you're not going to get in, if you think you're not going to try it, then you're not going to get it.
Right.
Right. So yes. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, even knowing that the answer might be no, because once you get confident in getting that rejection and moving through it, you're going to gain more confidence to try bigger things.
That is such good advice. And I always talk about connections, and I everything that you say, I mean, obviously you're an inspiration to anybody who doesn't, have that automatic connection in their head to you, but like, it's just so what I believe and what I think that you express it very well. And that is, again, why I'm so excited you're here, because I think that claiming your confidence and getting confident in the failures and moving forward is really, that's inspiring and very cool. So I have to ask you really quickly, what sorority were you in at Suwanee?
So our sororities were not national.
Right,
I was at Theta
right.
Pi.
Yeah.
And it was great. We had the rush process. I think at the time, 95% of the campus, 90% of Suwanee was Greek. And so it really ran the entire social life there.
Right.
Everything revolved around the fraternities and sororities. The fraternities were all national. Some of the sororities have since become national. But it was such a huge part of my time there. And I'm still such good friends with women from all sororities. But certainly my roommate and I were 4-year roommates, and we were both in the same sorority, which was really fun.
We just had one of my favorite young women I've worked with or met. She just they just had Rush like 2 weeks ago. And it's very different. And it's in that situation, if you put yourself out there, you're probably going to be in a sorority. It's there as far as the way that Suwanee does Rush, it's very different than most of the schools we work with. But it's like you said, it's so strong there. And I believe my very good friend Hart Wilhite Payne was a Theta Pi at Suwanee, but you're younger than us, so I can't.
Well, she must be a great woman. I've only met great Theta Pies.
Yes, I do. I love that. I love the inclusivity of Suwanee, the Greek system. So anyway, I digress. So you got a job at Christie's through hard work and perseverance, and then what happened?
So then I stayed for the next 23 years to really give you the whole story. But the beginning of my career was in the events department. So I worked in special events. We planned somewhere between sort of 400 and 500 events a year. Entertaining is such a huge part of the auction business because they want clients to come in and feel like it's their home. They want people to feel like it's family. And in order to do that, they do dinners and lunches and breakfast, and it is nonstop and ongoing. I never left. I mean, we lived at the auction house and it was so fun. I always think back to those days as some of my best days when we worked so hard, but we never wanted to leave. We would still be there at sort of 10 o'clock at night, knowing we had to be there the next morning at 8:30, and yet nobody wanted to walk out the door. And then about 3 years in, there was an interesting part of an auction house, which is probably different than any other place, where you can have the opportunity to become an auctioneer. And there are two types of auctioneers. There are art auctioneers and charity auctioneers. And when I was starting out at Christie's, the art auctioneers were basically all men. There were a couple of women, but it was really all men. And even if you were a woman, you were probably taking the auctions that were sort of like the books, the dusty books auctions or auctions like that. And so when I went to try out for art auctioneering, at that point, it wasn't even something that was going to be in my wheelhouse for a long time. I wasn't an officer in the company, but we also had the opportunity to try out for charity auctioneering. And charity auctioneering is very different than art auctioneering. So if you have ever seen a movie where there is an art auctioneer, they're probably sitting in a lovely sale room and there's someone with, discreetly holding their paddle up. It's very quiet. Everyone's very well dressed. And that's really what an art auction is like. A charity auction is quite different because you are basically out somewhere, for me in New York City, on stage late at night at a nonprofit gala. So again, I always hearken these back to movies that you see, people are so well dressed. You're at the New York Public Library. It's this grand affair. And then an auctioneer gets on stage and tries to sort of sell things that people don't really want, a vacation house in Mexico or, a puppy or something just to raise money for a nonprofit. And it was interesting because even at that young age in special events, we would accompany the auctioneers out to the charity auction. So I saw this different world that very much as a night owl and someone who loves events and entertaining, it really appealed to me. And the art auctioneering, I didn't really see a path forward in the same way. And so I went to try out for the charity auctioneering. And I went down with probably 20 people, I think, in the class, and they started cutting people on the first day. So half of the class is cut. Then the next day, another half is cut. It's probably a little bit like Rush. And then
I was like, as you said that, I'm like, okay, so she went through Rush. Okay.
Yes, I basically went through Rush for auctioneering. And at the end, I was left with three guys and me. And they said to me, because I was so much younger than most of the people there, listen, we're going to pass you. We don't really know what to do with you, but we'll just send you to the auctions that nobody wants to take. So a lot of the people were specialists. They were traveling a lot for work, or they were older, so they had families. I was 24 years old. I loved being out at night, and I was already out because of the events. So I could just leave work and go straight to the auctions because most of them take place at sort of like 9 or 10 at night. And it really, everything about it really appealed to my personality as a night owl. And so all of a sudden I had this second career on top of my full-time job that I was doing as a volunteer for Christie's. And it kind of started out, I tell this story in the book about going to my first auction, and I thought I was going to get on stage and just knock it out of the park. And going back to what I talk about with failure and rejection, you guys, it was so painful. I hit the gavel down, like a judge with my gavel. I slammed it down. The top broke off. It rolled under the podium. This is my first auction. By the time I'd climbed back up from under the podium, everybody was talking and I'd lost the crowd, which now I know you just can't do because you can never get them back once you've lost them. And so I left that one and I cried all the way home. And I was actually in Kansas City, so I cried all the way back to my hotel. And that kind of became this really interesting second part of my life. And because I'm always attracted to things that I'm not good at, that I think I could be better at, that became almost like an obsession to me. And because there were so many auctions to take and nobody really wanted to take them, my eagerness got me a lot further, I think, than probably anything else, because all of a sudden I could take an auction any night of the week. And so, I know Paul Ollinger, Paul Ollinger.
Yes.
And to those of you who are listening, I was on his podcast and he came on mine. And that's actually how Trisha and I met each other. And he's a comedian. And we talk a lot about the importance of getting fearless on stage. And that really comes from repetition and getting, as I like to say, getting beat up on stage. You're up there, people aren't paying attention. How do you get them to come back? And I would say after I've done my 10,000 hours on stage, all of a sudden I wasn't fearless. I wasn't scared anymore. And so to me, the audience is like a puzzle that I have to figure out when I get on that stage. It's like, what's going to make them stop talking? Is it a joke? Is it quiet? Is it being okay to sit in that silence for a little bit? Is it a flattering comment towards somebody who's bidding at the beginning? I have this sort of arsenal of tools after having done this for so long that I can employ one by one. But it took probably 10 years being on stage 70 to 100 nights a year to get to the place where I was comfortable enough to do it. So people always say, you're such a natural. I'm like, I'm not a natural. I've learned how to do this through hard work and perseverance, which, as I said before, I think is kind of a theme of everything in life.
I'm writing that down. That's why. Because yes, and that's funny. I'm not at all comparing anything that I do with you, but I was thinking this morning about, what's the word I'm looking for? Thankful. I'm being thankful for them. And I was thinking about when we had a big party for this podcast launch, and it was also a book launch for a friend of mine. Same night, we planned the event together, and he got up there and he was very funny and he is very grateful, but people listened to him. I got up there and started listing the people that I was grateful for. But nobody was listening to me. Like, it was like full on talking the entire time I was speaking. And so I obviously didn't know how to read a room. I should have just said, I'm going to thank all these people individually instead of listing, I'm thankful for Lydia, I'm thankful for Paul, and like giving a little, this is what they did for me to help me launch this podcast or whatever. But so I feel like reading the room is something that one would have to, hard work and perseverance. I don't think many people are really natural just from the beginning. Do you?
Right. No, I don't. And I also think, when you think about public speaking or you think about presenting yourself, especially in a room of people, one thing that if you're Southern, you're going to have in your back pocket is the ability to tell through storytelling. I think it's just very much a part of being Southern. Anytime I'm interfacing with anyone in the South, I've lived in New York for 25 years now, I always think to myself, like, you have to forget that you're in New York right now and listen and don't interrupt. Like, let them tell the story, because that's how they're giving you the lesson. That's very much how my dad speaks. It's always told through stories. And so one thing I say on stage is, don't get up there and say, in your case, thank you to 15 people. Tell the story of your podcast, how it came to be, and those people become part of the story. And that makes people listen and pay attention when you're on stage.
Wow, that's really... So look, I just learned something at the ripe old age of 57, but that is also something that I really drill into my clients when they're going through rush and they're worked up and they're stressed out about it, and they want to know, all right, what am I going to be asked, and what am I supposed to say? And I'm different, I think, than a lot of people who do this coaching in this way. I'm like, take a breath and actually listen to what they're saying, and then you can have a conversation that's meaningful. That is not, it's not an interview. You're not in an I mean, it's sort of like an interview, but as far as the way you're speaking and conversing and learning about each other, that is the greatest gift you can give, is to listen to the person and actually hear the words and think about what you want to know, which is, which is something that I have learned. And I try to tell our clients, I don't think we'd be talking about listening right now, but I'm listening to you and I'm listening to your advice and to your words of inspiration. And so I want to talk about listening, so
Yeah.
I think that is the skill. And I love the storytelling thing. And that is the guy that I was hosting with. His book is about Southern game day. So, I mean, he's from Cochran, Georgia. His name's Charlie English. He was also on this podcast, but he's as Southern as they come. And that's very engaging. And they listened to him. And he probably did. Now that you say it, he probably did thank people in it. And I just was like standing up there, listing. So that was good.
Well, now you know. Now you're ready for the next time.
Now I'm ready. So when my book launch party, I'm not going to stand up there. I'm going to tell a story.
Tell a story. Tell a story of how the book came to be.
I want to tell a story of how the book came to be and how my inspiration, Lydia Fenet, told me that the way to get you people to listen is to listen to this.
It's this great story.
To this great story, exactly. So you did that for 25 years.
23 years. Yes.
23. And then where did your path go?
So it was interesting because having done that job for a long time, so I ran the events department. Really, by the time I was 30, I was running the events department for the Americas, which was really fun. But I also felt like there was a limit to how many events I wanted to do. I mean, at that point, when we were doing, 400 to 500 a year, it was just I was done. I had done it. I decided to start a new department for the company, really based on partnerships and figuring out, if Christie is trying to get these people in and these people are, huge clients of a massive bank, there's probably a good fit there. So how can we collaborate and create a partnership? So I started a new department for the company called Strategic Partnerships. And then I ran that for the second half of my career at Christie's. But the interesting thing about the career part of my time at Christie's and the auctioneering was at some point they really started to almost become separate things for me because I was taking so many in addition to a full-time job, in addition to starting to have a family and having children, that my life had become pretty much a 24-hour hamster wheel, right? So
It sounds like it. Wow.
I had small babies. I was getting up super early. I had 3 children under the age of 4. So I was doing all the things that you're doing when you have small babies, and then going to the office all day, coming home to help bathe the babies and then make sure that they were in bed, and then going back out to take auctions, getting home at 11 o'clock at night, getting up and doing it all again at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I think because I had done it for so long, it didn't actually seem that odd to me. But the one thing
seems odd to me.
Right. I know. I think now in retrospect, I look back, I'm like, what on earth was I doing? But at the time I was having a blast, honestly. For me, it was just a life well lived. And so I got to a point probably about 10 years into the second portion of my career, running strategic partnerships, maybe a little bit before, where I started noticing this amazing thing was happening. And that was that I was getting asked advice by a lot of younger women. And I always believe if you can learn something, you can teach it. And most of them were coming to me for career advice, or they were coming to me for advice about how to public speak, how to negotiate, how to network. But the most interesting thing, honestly, was that a lot of women, when I would go to events, would come up to me when I got off stage. And they would tell me how bad they were at selling. I could never do what you do, Lydia. I could never stand on stage and ask for things. I could never ask anyone for anything. I have a jewelry business, but I just feel so uncomfortable because when someone doesn't buy it, it means they hate me. And there were so many things that I had personally overcome over the course of my career that I started to think, going back to the storytelling, I think there's a story here. And I love to write. Suwanee's a big writing school. You do so much reading and writing when you're there. And it was a skill that I'd exercised for, my 4 years of college and all through high school. And I've always just really loved to write. I love to read, which I think sort of goes hand in hand with writing. And
agreed.
So I put pen to paper and started sort of scribbling out what this might look like. And essentially,
how old were you at this point?
I was in my 30s. I think at that point, I hadn't had my third child. So I was probably like mid to late 30s at this point. And I think that timing is also a really interesting thing. And we talked a little bit about failure at the beginning and, wanting something that you may not get. And I found that throughout the course of my career, there are so many things that I think are supposed to happen at a certain time. Like,
oh my
this
gosh,
is going to happen. I know it's going to happen. Why isn't it happening? And then 3 years later, when it happens, I realize it happened at exactly the right time. So I've really given over to that in life. And you'll hear me, my PR team, anyone I work with, if something doesn't hit, I'll say, guys, it's not a problem. And it could be something big, it could be
Right.
something that we all thought was going to happen. I'll say, listen, if it didn't happen, it probably wasn't meant to happen. It might come back. It also might come back in a completely different form, or it might not come back at all. I don't know what the answer is, but there's a reason this isn't happening now. And I've really given myself over to that. And I would say to someone who tried to rush something and it didn't work out, 3 years down the road, you're going to understand why. 5 years down the year, you're going to be able to connect those dots backwards. So give over some piece of yourself to that. I think that's a huge part of learning. But at that point, I started writing The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, not even knowing the title, not even really know anything about it. And my best friend had an agent. She'd written one book and sent me her agent's information. And I would send Meg the information about this book. And she would say, you have a book in you. It's definitely not this book. So talking about rejection, that went on for years, by the way. That wasn't like 1 year, that was many years. And then kind of going back to that timing piece, the New York Times loved this idea of a woman who was working in a company like Christie's, doing 2 jobs, 3 children. It was kind of like everything they'd ever wanted in a working mom day in a life piece. And so when I was pregnant with my 3rd child, they followed me around for a day at Christie's and then came out with me to an auction that night. I was hugely pregnant. I had the baby a week later, actually.
Oh
I'm
my
on
gosh.
stage. I know. I'm on stage with Kelly Ripa. I'm 6 feet tall. I think she's like 4'11". I mean, I kept thinking, God, if I fall, I'm going to squash her.
You're going to take her
flat.
out.
Seriously. And so I basically, the reporter who was with me asked me, what do you do when you get off stage at night? And I said, well, I try never to get on a screen because I'm so tired and I don't want to wake myself up. So I either read a book or I write this book that I'm writing. I mean, I was not writing a book, let's be honest. I had like a couple of scribbles down that Meg had been like, don't write about a lemonade stand. And so, nothing really happened with the piece. It didn't happen for 6 months. And then, if you remember sort of 2017, it was the year that Harvey Weinstein's piece came out of the New York Times. And there was just this huge Me Too movement that erupted out of nowhere. I think out of women just feeling like they were being held back and being told that they couldn't do things. And right on the heels of that article, the article about a senior executive at an auction house writing a book called The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You came out.
Oh,
And
wow.
I sold it the next week.
I was going to say, there's a reason.
There's a reason. And that for me was such a defining point of my career. If I really look back on it, that was when all of a sudden this very traditional career path that I had for 20 plus years started to take a turn. And all of a sudden I could see this other highway leading off into all these other exciting things. And I realized that the enthusiasm for what I'd been doing for so long was waning greatly.
Right.
And that the excitement for the other things was really exciting. And that's where I wanted to head. And so it took years from that point. It took almost 5-6 years from that point. But ultimately, that book led to another book. And that led to me leaving Christie's and starting a talent agency for charity auctioneers. So I basically run a talent agency. So if people need to find a charity auctioneer, they call me. If I'm not available, I have 12 auctioneers who I represent, who I can send, who I know their incredible work value. I mean, I know their work ethic. I know how they look on stage. I know that they've been trained. I give them all my tips and tricks. I stay on the line to make sure that everybody understands exactly what they need to do to make their auction successful. And then they go on stage that night. So I've really decided to scale this business so that I can ensure that there is quality and there's control over the people who are going on those stages. And that makes me excited because I know the charities benefit from that.
Wow. I am just sitting here and so much of what you said, it mirrors. So the same thing. I now have 15 mentors that work for me because I wasn't able to sustain doing what I was doing, regardless of what it was. I wasn't able to sustain it. And then I started wanting to be creative. And then I got an agent, and that agent was not the right agent for me. And it took a very long time to get my current agent. This is the book agent I'm talking about. My point is, I learned that lesson because of where I am now with the book. It was not meant to be. Whereas I had this really big time agent, and he believed in me, and he's a great guy. But he wasn't the right agent for me. And so it just taken a lot longer to get to this point. But in that time, I learned so much about me and what I'm really trying to do, which is to give these people confidence and help them find out who they are way before I did. And I'm talking about my clients now. So, and that's who my book is aimed at, or is for that age person. But I didn't start out. It started off, I was going to write a funny book about Rush and the stories and a little bit of advice, but now it's morphed into something. Anyway, I'm babbling on because everything that you said just resonates so much and I've had people say, wait, are you not sad that this didn't, happen the way? And I'm like, no, I really think that this is way better for me. And the timing is while it's longer, the timing is longer. I've been saying a book's coming out for a year and a half now. It's longer, but it's going to be so much better. And it's such a better fit. And the person, the agent that I have sees me so much more clearly. And anyway, that is such great advice. And it's what I'm living every day. And that is, and I, try to tell people that in the moment when they're, because I get calls from devastated families every day, all day. They've experienced this rejection. They think their world is ended. I can think of one person in particular who didn't get into a sorority and then called me, and she was going to transfer schools, which I get a lot. And she was going to leave. She was going to leave. And I worked with her and talked to her, and she ended up getting an internship, speaking of, that she would have never gotten if she were in a sorority. And then that, catapulted this unique, anyway, she did pledge a sorority. We worked on that. But the point is she has so many more things in her life that are enriching her life that she would never have gotten. I mean, I'm not saying she wouldn't have had a great time, but she wouldn't have had that. Her failure in that situation led to so much more for her. And I see that every time someone calls me, they're devastated. They think their world is over, want to transfer. The parents are like, what can we do to fix this? I've been offered, most recently, I was offered $1 million to get someone into a sorority. Like, I'm not making this up. And I'm like, wait, no, back off. Like, hold on. There's a reason this happened. We're going to figure it out. And we're going to figure out together the next best path. And we did. We figured out, and that's not that rare. I mean, the $1 million is rare, But
I also think, to that point, the other thing that's, when someone comes in and talks to you about that, and to anyone who's young and listening to this, of course you're going to be devastated. Like, of course you're going to grieve. I mean, it's so painful to be rejected. No one likes to be rejected.
Right.
But I would also say to that, don't underestimate the importance of learning that lesson over the course of your life. Because, someone coming in to band-aid a situation after something bad has happened isn't necessarily the best thing for you.
Right.
Like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to understand what it feels like to be humiliated, so that the next time it happens, you can think to yourself, okay, I know what that feels like and it doesn't feel as bad. Let me give you a really good example of this. So I talk about artificial timelines all the time, and you just touched on this as well, that something is supposed to happen when you think it's going to, and then it doesn't, and you fall apart, right? So I sold The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, my first book, to Netflix in 2020 to be made into a series, 30-minute dramedy. It's going to be Emily in Paris. I mean, I sold it. I did the whole pitch with an entire team. We'd worked on it for months. We sold it. Netflix called. They were like, we want it. It's going to be amazing. I mean, I was jumping up and down on the bed like a child. I was so excited. So this was August of 2020. Shortly after we sold it, pretty much the entire team was fired or moved to a different department. So all of a sudden, all this excitement, all this work for months on end, it goes to another team. The team knew nothing about the auction world. They weren't interested in it. So we started again at the beginning. We had to sort of educate them about the auction world. The whole thing's taking time. Now we're well into the second year of this. They don't like my writer who's on it. They fire her. And then the writer's strike happens. So now we're 3 years into the project. And the option, I think, at that one was only 2 years, but because of the writer's strike, it ended up being pushed. At the end of the writer's strike, no one even knew that they had the project, and nothing happened.
Right.
Fine. I've always been a big believer in if you have 9 balls in the air, you care less about one of them falling. So, all of a sudden it's like one ball's gone, who cares? The producer, who was originally the person who found me to talk to me about bringing this book to screen, wasn't willing to give up and happened to be on a girls' trip. She lives in LA with someone who works for Hulu. She talked to that woman. And sure enough, in December of this year, I sold the book for the second time to Hulu. This is
Wow.
4 years later, 4 years
Right.
after the first time. So, what are the lessons learned here? With Netflix, I was willing to give everything away because I was so excited about the
Right.
fact that they were taking it, right? I gave away the name of the book. I couldn't use it for my podcast. I couldn't use it anymore. Like all of these things that I had just given away because I had no understanding of what I was actually doing. 4 years later, I was able to get exactly what I wanted out of that contract. I honestly was always willing to walk away because it already rolled out once. So ultimately, it didn't get made. Who cared? I wanted it done on my terms. And now it is. So I got the name of the book back. I can use it for a podcast. There are all of these things that happen, as you said, not quickly, but they happen because they were supposed to happen. And ultimately, I have realized that just letting myself believe that it'll happen in the way it's supposed to happen and continuing to move the steps forward so that things do happen, doing that in tandem is the best way to get over failure and rejection. So take that for what it's worth. I hope that's helpful to someone out there, but it doesn't matter how successful someone looks on the outside. Like, what did you say at the beginning? Oh, I could spend all day reading this thing about Lydia. The last line of my bio says Lydia sold her book to Hulu. Well, it doesn't say Lydia also sold her book to Netflix too. It
Right.
just nothing happened, right? So we only celebrate the wins. There are so many failures on the other side of those wins. So know that we all go through it. And I hope to someone out there today that is a really helpful message.
That's a very helpful message. And again, completely resonates that I've been working on a movie and it's been in production, or not in production, but it's been, same path. And then the writer's strike. I mean, there's so many factors. And my my movie agent was telling me that, this was, I don't know, a few months ago, and I don't even know if I should say what company it was, but like same thing. All these people had been working on these projects and then they were let go. And didn't directly affect me. But what I'm saying is saying like all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under them, which then affects other people. And it's just, so all I'm trying to say is that is a great story and it is a great lesson and a very eloquent way to say what I try to tell these people. There is a reason. If you've done the work, you've confidently gone, and then you, like you said, I always say, take a moment, grieve. Sometimes this is happening and you have to pivot and come up with a plan B in like 10 minutes. Like I'm talking about, like if a cut or a release comes out during rush and then you're devastated, you have to somehow put that in a bubble and deal with it later and pivot and recognize that you have a different path in a very quick way. So, but knowing that there is a path for you is very inspiring. And I think that gives me hope for the way I'm dealing with stuff. I just know that something's going to happen when it's supposed to happen. So I think that is great advice. And so are you now have your agency are you writing another book? I mean, I'm not saying you should.
Yeah, I've submitted my third book proposal. So we're actually in waiting stages right now. So going back to who knows, yes or no, but I'll find out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But yes, I am writing a third book. Again, going back to what I said about taking the name back, this third book will loosely be something about a side hustle and will include the title, The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You. So we get back to the basics, which is exciting.
So was there like a statute of limitation? I'm just curious, like so Netflix bought it and then you gave away, and I'm also very familiar with that too. And I sometimes sell myself short just because I'm so excited to be in the room with these people, like, you know, and that they're interested in me, like these huge Hollywood people and whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I totally understand that, like being so excited that you're just like, oh, I don't have to get paid. I don't have to get paid or whatever. I mean, you have to get paid, but
yes, you definitely have to get paid.
yeah, no, but I'm just saying like taking less. So real quick, how did that, look, how did you get it back?
Well, because it's a completely different company. So it's an option. Essentially,
Okay.
they buy a certain amount of time. And if they don't do something during that time, it rolls out of the option.
Right.
So
Okay.
I think it was 18 months. And then they did another 18 months after that, or maybe another 6 months. And then because of the writer's strike, they declare force majeure, meaning that they can keep it until the end. And so then when it rolls out, it's if nothing's happened, nothing's happened.
Gotcha.
And so the deal with Hulu for me was a completely different deal because I
Right.
already knew what I'd given away during Netflix. Because really what happened was I started to realize that there were certain things that I couldn't do because of the deal that I'd signed with Netflix that I'd never thought of before.
Right.
So those 4 years really gave me the opportunity. When I was starting my podcast, I remember thinking, well, I want it to be called The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, because that's the reason I got the podcast. I had done an Instagram live during COVID called The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is ... fill in the blank with the name. And I did it every day for 4 months. And the team at Rockefeller Plaza, Rockefeller Center, saw it and then reached out and said, listen, we're opening a podcast studio. Would you ever think about coming to podcast here? And you could use our studio and you'd be sort of, one of our headliner women who's doing it, having worked in Rockefeller Plaza my whole life. It all made sense. And so
Yeah, that's synchronicity there.
it was, but I couldn't use the title of the book because I'd given it away when I signed it over. And so with Hulu, I was able to carve it out for the name of a podcast.
That's awesome. So yeah, live and learn and
Live and learn.
And that's, I mean, I could talk to you for 75 days, but I also know that you got home at 2:30 in the morning last night from skiing.
Skiing. Our skis did not come with us, sadly. They're still somewhere else.
Every single thing, even for you guys listening, that she's saying, first off, get the books.
Thank you, Trish.
The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, and Claim Your Confidence. But everything you're saying is just it's gold. It's you are such an inspiration, and you're an inspiration to me because because of the failures or the things, the roadblocks that you've had, just because everybody experiences this and you have persevered. And I'm sure, I don't know if you will or not, but if you have more, I know personally that you will just find a different way that's perfect for you. And I think that's great advice for people listening. It's very, very, very important, one, to listen to these things, but two, to know that if it's meant to happen, it's going to happen.
Yes,
it is.
Absolutely.
And at least in my world, if you prepare and you're confident in your preparation and you put your best self out there, then if it doesn't happen to be one particular sorority, there is something better. So you got to have faith after you process the trauma of it, which is why I have my business. I have lived it. I know how bad it is. So I'm not minimizing that at all. I'm just saying that, it's not something that most people can hear right away, but it is a fact. And so try to remember that. So
yes, absolutely.
Okay, so you got in at 2:30 and you probably didn't even look at the notes, but this is a test. It's if you did your homework or not. So Bama Rush Talk popularized the hashtag OOTD outfit of the day. For Mad Rush, I am repurposing hashtag OOTD into observation of the day. So what is your hashtag observation of the day, Lydia?
Well, my hashtag observation of the day would be something that I was thinking about last night, which when we were waiting, as you said, I got in at 2:30 in the morning and we were waiting an hour for skis that never arrived. And my husband had been over at the oversized luggage and I was sitting with the rest of our luggage and, just sort of sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I truly think that one of the most things that we have the ability to do that we often give away to other people is empower ourselves to be positive. And I was sitting there for that hour. I could have been fuming, right? I could have been like, where are our bags? The flight was already delayed and all of the different things. And instead, I just kept saying, and it was what I said to my husband when I could see him kind of coming back to me, feeling really frustrated by what had just happened. I said, well, I would choose to be here and have still skied this morning. Like I would choose
I love
to have had the day that we had, even if we got in at 2:30 in the morning and that today's going to be a tough day because we'll both be tired. But that to me was that moment. And it's something that I've learned to do. And I truly think no matter what the situation, how bad it is, there's always a way to look at it differently. Give yourself the power to do that. So that would be my observation of the day.
That's an amazing observation. And it's one of my favorite ever. So thank you for that. And I know that the listeners will also resonate with them, because everything you said just resonates so much with me. And you are a complete inspiration for me for all you've done. And I'm so grateful you were here today. And how can listeners find you?
Well, the easiest way to find me is on Instagram, because I live my life on Instagram. It's at Lydia Fenet. But also, as Trish kindly said, please pick up the books, The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You, and Claim Your Confidence, or tune into my podcast, Claim Your Confidence, where I interview just amazing women who've learned to claim their confidence in different ways.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm on it. Yes, I've got your book. I'm so mad I didn't get you to sign them when I was at the Southern Coterie, but
we'll just have to meet again.
Yes, we'll have to meet again, and I'll get it signed. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you get some rest today, and I know you'll reframe it into a great day. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be on your show.
Welcome to Time Out with Trisha. Because can you really give advice if you don't speak about yourself in the third person? I don't think so. This is exactly how I speak to my clients: the good, the bad, and the ugly. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now let's get into it. Okay, so part of getting yourself ready for a rush and preparing is, well, all of it is to move with intention. So I'm going to give you some prompts that I want you to write down, and they will help you figure out how to move with intention with your goals in mind. So number one, know your why. So I want you to write down, why do you want to be in a sorority? What brings you joy on a daily basis? What are the 5 things in your life that you value most? And what do you value in your friends and why? Moving with intention also is much easier if you start to know what makes you you. And so you can identify your strengths and address your weaknesses. So also, these are some other questions I want you to ask yourself. What would your friends say is your biggest strength? And what would your friends say is your biggest weakness? And then, what are the ways that people have most often described your personality? And what are you most proud of? So, like I said, use this information, your answers, to move with intention. Start working on your weaknesses and amplifying your strengths. You'll apply this concept to every step of the process, from preparation through the rush rounds themselves. So, do it. And that's it for Time Out with Trisha. We'll see you on another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. For additional Rush tips, updates, and more, please follow me on Instagram at Rush with Confidence. If you would like to reach out to us, or for more information, please email info@madrushpod.com. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry and Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Trisha Adams.